Dominoes. Level 1. The Wild West by John Escott. Read by Rick Adamson. Copyright Oxford University Press, 2010. Chapter 1.
Go west, young man.
Go west, young man, said an American newspaper in 1850. And thousands of Americans went. But people started moving to the American West nearly 50 years earlier. In 1803, American President Thomas Jefferson bought thousands of kilometers of land from the French for $15 million. The land was west of the Mississippi River and east of the Rocky Mountains. In today's United States, you can find Nebraska, Iowa, Kansas, Missouri, Oklahoma, Arkansas, and Louisiana there. The next year, Jefferson asked two men to go through this land to the Pacific.
When you find flowers and trees by the road, look carefully at them and write about them,
Jefferson said.
And talk to the people, too.
These two men were Meriwether Lewis and William Clark. In May 1804, Lewis and Clark went west with 46 men. It was November 1805 when they arrived at the Pacific. These were the early years of the Wild West, a time when the names Kit Carson, Sitting Bull, Wyatt Earp, Wild Bill Hickok, Butch Cassidy, Annie Oakley, and many more became famous across America. Western Trails. There were 3 important trails to the west, and they all began near the town of St. Louis. In 1821, the first white man left to travel the 1,300 kilometers to Santa Fe in New Mexico. Soon, this became an important trail to the southwest. Between 1826 and 1835, 1,500 men and 750 wagons traveled along the Santa Fe Trail, carrying shirts and trousers, knives, and many more things to sell to the people of New Mexico. At the end of the 1830s, it was not easy to find work in the East, and people did not have much money. They read about the West in books and newspapers and said,
"Everything is better there. Let's go west."
Early in the 1840s, thousands of families left their homes and traveled 3,200 kilometers to California and Oregon. It took them about 6 months. The Oregon and California trails became the 2 most famous trails. For the first 1,900 kilometers, the trails went across Kansas, along by the River Platte, and through the south of the Rocky Mountains. After that, the Oregon Trail went north to Oregon City. From there, It was not far to the Pacific. The California Trail went south to Sacramento. Families traveled along the trails in wagons or on horses. Some walked. Many became ill and died before they got near the West. Indians, now called Native Americans, killed some of them. From 1841 to the 1880s, about 350,000 people traveled to the West by these trails. Then the railroads came, and most families didn't need the trails.
Now we can travel by train,
they said. Wagon trains. Many families going west went with a wagon train. The train was a number of wagons traveling together. Sometimes there were 100 wagons carrying 200 or 300 people. Horses pulled the wagons, and they went about 25 kilometers a day. The first wagons were very large wagons from France. Later, families traveled in smaller wagons. Mountain men. The 1830s and 1840s were the years of the mountain men. They lived in the mountains, killed animals there, and sold the skins to make money. Sometimes they took people through the mountains. They knew the best trails and were often good friends with the Indians. Kit Carson. One of the most famous mountain men was Kit Carson. When he was 17, he left his home in Missouri and joined a wagon train going to Santa Fe. From there, he traveled north. When he was 19, he went to kill animals in California. It was the first of many visits to the mountains of the West. In January 1833, Carson was with about 50 mountain men on the Arkansas River in Colorado. Some Indians took 9 of their horses. The next day, Kit, with 12 more men, traveled more than 60 kilometers to find, fight, and kill those Indians. But he was usually a good friend of Native Americans. His first wife was an Arapaho Indian, and his second wife was a woman from the Cheyenne tribe. He had a daughter, and in 1842, he took her to Missouri because he wanted her to go to school there. On the road to Missouri, he met a man called John C. Fremont. Fremont worked for the American government, finding new trails across the West. Carson knew the land well, and for the next 5 years, he helped Fremont with his work. These years made Kit Carson famous. Later, he worked with the American Army. He was an Army scout in the war with the Navajo Indians. The Navajos fought with many different tribes of Indians in the West. In 1864, some of these tribes joined the white man's army to fight the Navajos. After the Navajos lost the war and their land, 8,000 Navajo men, women, and children went on the Long Walk, 480 kilometers from Arizona to New Mexico. Kit Carson was 59 when he died in 1868. He never learned to read. The Pony Express. At first, getting letters from the east to the west of America was slow. Then, in 1860, came the Pony Express. Its horses and riders were fast. They traveled from St. Joseph in Missouri to Sacramento in California. Every rider traveled 120 kilometers before giving his bag of letters to the next rider. The 3,120 kilometers from St. Joseph to Sacramento took 26 riders 10 days in all.